Hi, Sue.
Yay! Who else is on?
Well, we're all in the room.
Okay.
Other people will start calling in, but they'll be on mute.
Okay, very good.
Can you look? Oh, they can hear us though right now.
It's
can't
not, I'm not broadcasting yet.
they? Okay.
They can hear us right now.
They can hear us?
Oh, you gotta hit start video, so go
No.
back. Like,
I gotta say. What? I wanna start broadcast. Just 1 second. Are you an attendee yet? No, because I haven't broadcasted yet.
oh, that's cool.
If you go back, people are starting to call in now.
It looks like there's nobody on.
Yeah, they're starting to all, it's just quickly increasing.
Hi, everyone. We're just getting started.
Can you find me?
Can you mute us for a sec, or no?
But all the participants are, how many participants do we have? Good morning, everybody. Just give us a few minutes here. You ready? Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us on this Friday morning for our first Homes for All webinar. This is Allison Strike, the Deputy Director of Carver County CDA and Homes for All co-chair. Just a few quick Zoom 101. So folks on the phone, you're going to be on mute during the webinar. We will answer questions at the end of the webinar, and you can use the chat and Q&A function to ask questions. And Pastor Sue?
Hi, this is Pastor Sue Kesterman. I serve as Chief Executive Officer at Churches United in Moorhead and as Homes for All co-chair. I'm glad to welcome you all to this meeting and this webinar. Homes for All is a nonpartisan statewide coalition of more than 250 endorsing organizations, from nonprofits to for-profit partners, as well as local governments from across the entire state of Minnesota.
So Homes for All, a little bit of history, started in 2012 when housing organization and others came together around a unified message to collectively advocate for the continuum of housing. And our overall goals are more state funding, better policies that will lead to housing stability for all Minnesotans, and to ensure people are able to find and keep safe, stable, and affordable housing. Sue?
Yep, I forgot to unmute. With our champion lawmakers, housing advocates, and bold and concise messaging, Homes for All has advocated for state funds to build or preserve over 13,000 units of affordable housing. We've also cultivated over $390 million in legislative wins for housing stability across the continuum for Minnesotans. If you want to know more about our 2019 legislative asks and wins, there's a link there that you can access.
So a little bit about the Homes for All leadership. There are two co-chairs, Pastor Sue and myself, and then three main teams that make up our coordinating team, which is policy, communications, and community engagement, and you'll hear from each of them during the webinar. The co-chairs and the team co-chairs check in once a week, and then we also hold monthly meetings with the full coalition. Pastor Sue?
Yep, so there are ways to get involved. One of the ways is the full coalition meetings, which are held the third Thursday of every month from 10 a.m. to noon. And you can participate in those either in person, the location rotates, or through video or phone conferencing. You can join through the computer, and there's a link there. Video is preferred, or by phone. And you can see the number there as well as the meeting ID. And you can find more details on the For All website under coalition meetings.
And then those of you who are interested in signing up for coalition updates, just general updates and information about our meetings, you can register on our website to get those updates, and that link is shared as well. So with that, we are going to turn it over to our policy team.
Hello, everyone. So we know you can't see us, but there are three of us here from the policy team in the room. So my name is Carrie Johnson. I work at the Metropolitan Consortium of Community Developers, and I'm one of the policy co-chairs that works primarily focused on items that encompass or relate to the Department of Minnesota Housing.
And my name is Haley Kulkind. I'm the Public Policy Manager at Catholic Charities. And the focus of my co-chair is focusing on the Department of Human Services, kind of the services and sustainability end of the agenda.
This is Libby Murphy, the Deputy Policy Director here at Minnesota Housing Partnership. I work very closely with Carrie on things relating to Minnesota housing. And then Dominic McQuarrie could not be here with us today. He works closely with Haley on the, all things related to the Department of Human Services in support of housing and services.
And he works at the Wilder Foundation. So how this will work is we've got some slides and we'll kind of talk you through the information, but we know that you might have some questions. So we encourage you to use that chat feature on the webinar to ask us questions, and we'll get to those at the end of the entire presentation, not just by teams, because some of the answers might incorporate multiple teams. So how do we do our work, or what does the policy committee do? So the policy committee hears and considers proposals from coalition members during the fall. We've moved to a 2-year legislative agenda, and we started that in 2018. So we heard 44 proposals in 2018, and we did adopt some bylaws to amend our agenda if needed, and that's kind of the process that we're in right now. In advance of and during the legislative session, which this next year starts February 11th in 2020, we also have meetings with the governor's office, relevant agencies, lawmakers, and then other key stakeholders that aren't necessarily coalition members.
So I'll talk, this is Haley, I'll talk a little bit about who sits on our policy committee. So typically team members include advocates and lobbyists who have experience up at the Capitol, but the team is open to all member organizations, and we are really encouraging a wide variety of participation so that we have a balance between metro and non-metro folks, as well as service providers, developers, and people with lived experience to contribute to our policy agenda. If you or our member organization, you want to learn a little bit more about how to be involved in the specific work that the policy team does, you can reach out to any of the co-chairs here. Every organization that endorses the coalition's previous legislative agenda is able to vote on proposals for amendment or developing the agenda for the next year.
And this is Libby here again, just talking a little bit about what participation looks like with the policy team. We're a team that meets very regularly throughout the year. Typically in the fall is our agenda setting process, or this year we've been going through our amendment process as we adopted a 2-year agenda last year. And so we've been meeting regularly as a team to discuss various proposals that are trying to make their way onto our agenda for this coming 2020 session. And we're typically meeting every other week, and that's for 2 hours, and that's a general commitment in the fall. And then we also use this time to strategize about how to more deeply engage lawmakers and strengthen our relationships with elected officials and coordinate things like in-district meetings. And then throughout session, we meet very regularly, at least once a week. The full policy team gets together to discuss strategy and coordinate our meetings and our efforts over at the Capitol. And then Haley and Dominic will lead another meeting at one point in the week that's focused on strategies related to DHS-related issues on our agenda. And Carrie and I will lead another meeting for folks who are focused on the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency and other policy related to that work. And so it's a commitment, but people are able to make what they can with their availability, knowing that most of the participants who attend those regular meetings are advocates and lobbyists who are very busy at the Capitol. And so there's many opportunities to engage us, and we make everything accessible by phone as well.
Yeah, and so we know that some people might be wondering, how we break up the work. We touched a little bit on it, but our work spans more agencies and more committees as well. So we'll talk a little bit about the coalition issue areas that we focus on in terms of policy. So with regard to the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, so we advocate for funding requests during budget years, which we'll get into in a little bit. And this past year, which was the budget year, we had a $39 million request. We ended up getting a 10% budget increase over the last legislative session, which was the largest increase of any agency this past legislative session. And this includes programs like the Challenge Fund that provides development dollars to build and preserve affordable housing across the continuum, Family Homeless Prevention and Assistance Program, or FHPAP, which provides rental assistance to families. And then we also finally got the Homework Starts with Home program in the base budget, so it will hopefully continually get funding moving forward. And then so there are relevant committees that break up the work, and that's how the legislature kind of takes care of monitoring and considering different items for their budgets. And so the committees that oversee this part of the agenda are the Housing Committee in the House of Representatives, which is chaired by Alice Hausman, and then the Ag, Rural Development, and Housing Finance and Policy Committees in the Senate, which are chaired by Tori Restrom and Senator Weber.
Yep, so this is Haley again. I'll talk a little bit about our Human Services agenda. So we have a $38 million package that was approved last year for the Human Services part of the Homes for All agenda. That included providing emergency shelter, supportive services, and programs for homeless families, as well as housing supports for Minnesotans with severe mental illness and an increase to the room and board rate for housing support. Typically, our committees are the different Health and Human Services committees in both the House and the Senate. And depending on what type of policy we adopt into our agenda this next year, we may end up in judiciary or other types of committees. But typically, for the Human Services piece, we focus mostly on the Health and Human Services committees.
And then I'll talk about bonding. Bonding is a huge component of what Homes for All has been successful at the legislature in terms of getting new resources for housing. It's a big part of our agenda this year. So typically, the budget is taken care of in even-numbered years. And so odd years, the legislature holds a shorter session in which it addresses bonding. So the government incurs some long-term debt to address some longer-term investments. The purpose of bonding is really to spread the cost of a project out over a time period similar to the benefits of that project. It's very similar to a household that cannot afford to buy a home outright in cash, but can afford monthly mortgage payments. And that's really what bonding allows the government to do, which can be particularly beneficial for capital projects like buildings and infrastructure. And so because government is incapable in many instances of saving for large-scale projects, bonding helps us pay for them over time. And Homes for All really advocates for two types of bonds, what we call general obligation bonds and housing infrastructure bonds. And I think we're going to do a follow-up, either a blog or maybe a webinar, we'll see, to kind of go into those differences because it can get a little confusing. But really, general obligation bonds are what we use to fund the maintenance of publicly owned housing assets. So anything in the public housing stock, we use general obligation bonds to fund things like the maintenance of replacing an elevator, energy improvements and for new windows and things of that nature are some things that we use those for. And then housing infrastructure bonds are very flexible yet very specific. So there's several different uses that the state can use housing infrastructure bonds for, and they include to build new permanent supportive housing, to preserve existing affordable housing stock, the preservation of cooperatively owned or mission-driven owned manufactured housing, senior housing, and land trusts. So those have been things that housing infrastructure bonds have been able to fund previously. This year, what it will be unique to Homes for All is that we are advocating for two new eligible uses. One is to support the construction and preservation of housing for households at or below 50% of median income, but who don't require permanent supportive housing. So those households that need housing, but don't need the supportive wraparound services that are currently eligible through housing infrastructure bonds. And then we're also advocating for a one-time set aside to use bonding dollars for shelter and capital improvements to shelters, and also for the new construction of shelter. As a coalition, we decided through our amendment process that we were going to focus our efforts on advocating for $500 million in bonding, which is bigger than we've ever gone before, bolder than we've ever gone before. And this is really due to, we feel like it's time for us to reflect the needs that's in the community, in addition to the fact that we are trying to amend the eligible uses to serve more households. And so we thought that increasing our ask to $500 million is both reflective of the need in the community, because for every project that Minnesota Housing is able to fund through bonds, it has to reject 3 viable projects. And so the committees that we'll go through are the Capital Investment Committee, and for us, we're grateful and lucky to have Representative Hausman and Senator Senjum, who really help us champion this issue, as well as Governor Walz. It will be a top priority for him this session.
Great, thanks, Libby. That is certainly a complicated and complex topic. So as Libby mentioned, we may be able to provide some more detail in some other format, a blog or another video in the future. And so to kind of highlight what goes on at the state capitol during the legislative session, we can briefly talk about that. Although, you know, I think we would all say that the day-to-day is always different. It's never the same. And sometimes it's a lot of waiting around for something to happen or somebody to pop out of a door and have a press conference. So it's a lot of talking to people. So the legislature operates on a biennial process, as I mentioned. So it starts on odd years, and then as the first year of the biennial session, and then moves into an even year. And as we kind of have mentioned before, there are budget years and then bonding and policy years. So the legislature, though, is supposed to wrap up the Monday before Memorial Day weekend every year. That doesn't always happen, and sometimes, like this past year in legislative session in 2019, they went into a special session in order to get the work done. Sometimes special sessions can be long, months long, or have breaks in between, and sometimes they can be just a couple of hours. And then occasionally during bonding years, there may be a supplemental budget too, and that really depends on the budget forecasts that come out predicting the state's revenue and incomes reserves. So also very complicated and not necessarily something that we all need to know, but the policy co-chairs are in tune with it, so you can be rest assured.
Yeah, so one of the other primary responsibilities of the co-chairs, policy co-chairs, is to turn our agenda into bills and get it passed. Obviously, we can't do this without the support of all of the members around the table, but we take our legislative agenda once it's finalized each year, and we have conversations with legislators. Bills can't make it through the legislative process without authors and co-authors, so part of our job is finding legislators who want to be champions on our issues. And once we have those legislators, we work with the Office of the Reviser, who basically tells us how to take our ideas and put it into statutory law, into bill language. The author then introduces bills on the prospective floors. So if we want to get a bill to the end of session, typically we have to have bills in both the Senate body and the House body. And so sometimes you'll see bill number that is HF 300 and Senate File 500. HF means House file. That means there's a House author and it's been introduced in that body. SF equals Senate file, which means it has a Senate author and it's been introduced in the Senate body. Sometimes that gets a little confusing. There are what's called bill companions. So even though House file may be 300 and the Senate file may be 500, it may be the exact same bill language or bill idea that's been introduced in the two bodies. And so we help maneuver those through committees in the process, and Libby will talk about that in a little bit. But that is one of the big things that we do as co-chairs to ensure that our good ideas become law someday.
Yeah, so after we've identified those bill champions to author and co-author our bills, and after they've been introduced into their respective bodies, the policy co-chairs and the entire policy team is really responsible for shepherding those bills throughout the committee process. So, for example, I'll just take the Challenge Fund as a program that I think many people are familiar with. It provides capital needs for both new construction and preservation. It's something that Homes for All has championed throughout its history. We would work with our bill author, which was Representative Gunther last year. Thank you, Carrie. And working with him and his legislative assistant to schedule a hearing for the bill in committee, in the relevant committee, which was the Affordable Housing Committee chaired by Representative Hausman. And then we work with the chief author to solidify testifiers and to help with a presentation so that he can make the case to his fellow committee members that there is a need for this program and that it is worth investing as a state. And so we work closely, we put together PowerPoint presentations, we ensure that there's representation from across the state who can come and testify on bills related to the Homes for All agenda to really support the continuum of housing and the general need for these programs that we've identified as being critical to our coalition. And then if the bill is heard, what frequently happens in the committee is that it's laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill. So what has become kind of standard practice at the Capitol when it comes to funding is that any funding related bills get laid over, and then it's really the discretion of the chair, as she, in this case, Representative Hausman, puts together her omnibus bill to include those pieces of legislation that had good discussion, statewide support, and makes, and so Representative Hausman, in the case of Challenge Fund, did include new funding for the Challenge Fund in her omnibus bill, which came and that was heard in the committee process. And again, Homes for All testifies once that omnibus bill comes out in favor or expresses disapproval of certain provisions within an omnibus bill, and then the committee will vote and send that bill to its respective floor, and it goes to the full body for consideration. And oftentimes the Senate and the House have very different omnibus bills, and so they meet in what's called a conference committee to hash out those differences before a bill can be sent to the governor for signing into law.
Also another complicated process.
Yes.
We know.
That could be a whole blog as well.
So I'm not sure, just to bear with us for a second, if this will work. We are trying to bring up the Minnesota Legislature website, which can be a useful tool for you throughout the legislative session. Okay, it didn't come up, but if you if you were to type that address into your browser, it would come up with the homepage for the legislature, and you would be able to look up things like who represents you, to find your lawmakers in order to contact them. You can put in your address, both your work address or your home address, and then you can also search bill numbers and committees. Once you find a committee, you can sign up for get added to their email list to keep abreast of what's going on. And then also there is a calendar tool, which if you click on a certain day during the legislative session, it will bring up the calendar, in the joint calendar in both the House and the Senate, letting you know what is going on that day, when committees are meeting, where they're meeting, and then what's on the agenda.
Great. So one of the other important things that you can do on this legislative website, which I believe you all can see at this point, is At the very top, you will see drop-down scrolls for the House, the Senate, and then one about midway through that says Bills. If you click on Bills, you will see those House files and those Senate files that we talked about earlier. If you know the bill number, you can look that up. You'll also see just shortly underneath that, it says bill introductions, which you can sign up for alerts for to see when certain bills have been introduced into the process, and that's kind of how you find out those bill numbers. We'll help you with that, so no worries. And then also in the drop-downs for the House and the Senate, you'll see a list of what are committees. And each of those committees, like we said, we've got sorry folks. So if you go to committees, you can go to the committee list and click on the prospective committees that interest you. And because you're at a Homes for All webinar, you can take down the list of the committees that we talked about earlier and click on the links and sign up for subscriptions to hear about when they schedule our bills, when they schedule other bills, and when they're taking public testimony on things. But we'll help you navigate that process, but just kind of a quick overview of how that works.
And then going back to our webinar slides, so we know that the communications team, they'll be jumping on here in just a second. We'll go into more in depth, but we just wanted to emphasize that taking action when the communications team sends out action alerts is extremely important and valuable to the work that we do at the Capitol. So right now, we have an action alert that we've been working on, and we'll send out some reminders here again next week to influence the governor's office as he's putting together his bonding bill to make sure that he includes a large number. So that's one way that you can help take action and help the coalition amplify our message at the Capitol.
Yeah, and another way is when we send out those action alerts later on in the legislative process, we'll ask you to call or email your lawmakers. What's great about local government is that your representative or your senator may answer and have a conversation with you about what's important to you. So we really encourage phone calls. Know that that's a little bit nerve-wracking for some folks, so you can certainly send an email too, and we can help out with that. But your voice is extremely impactful in influencing the decisions of lawmakers, so that's a huge help to us.
And just remember, lawmakers are just people, you know, so. And they are there to represent and serve you. So,
and we just want to emphasize the importance of sharing your story, and I'm sure Matt and the communications team will all, and Ron will speak to that, and the importance of attending things like Days on the Hill if you're available. These are really important days for your lawmakers to hear directly from their constituents and to hear your personal story. Personal stories move lawmakers to take action, and we can't emphasize that enough.
All right, so there's our information, but we'll turn it over to the communications team.
We just have a brief transition here while our comms co-chairs get over to the computer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kirsten Roki, and I am the Communications Director at the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless. And I'm also a co-chair of the communications team.
And I'm Amanda Horner. I lead communications for Catholic Charities of St. Paul and Minneapolis and co-chair the communications team for Homes for All. So we also typically have 6 to 10 team members. We're always looking for more. We like that to be very representative of our statewide membership and also that represent kind of different skills within communication. So everything from graphic design to website building to media relations. Anything that kind of falls in communications, we're always looking for help. And our emails are up there, so if you have any questions or would like to learn more, feel free to contact us. So our goals with communications team is we provide kind of the framework and tone and messages to support and pass the Homes for All legislative agenda. We also create all the materials that communicate our message. So all of the fact sheets, the website, anything that echoes what the policy team is doing up at the Capitol and the conversations that the community engagement team is having out in the community, we're helping to frame those up. And so we reach primary and secondary targets, everybody from kind of the grass tops, legislators, decision makers, media and reporters, to grassroots and everybody in between. We make a lot of opportunities for grassroots advocates to take action, as the policy team mentioned, so through letters to the editor campaigns, action alerts, and social media. And we encourage you not only to do that personally through your organization, but also through your networks, and so sharing with the stakeholders that your organization works with, or the folks that you just kind of interact with on a day-to-day basis in your work. You can kind of be these influencers, and so we really rely on you to spread that message. So we also kind of frame up the messaging, anything that is going out from Homes for All. And so it's all based kind of on this idea of where we live impacts everything. And so we use concrete examples like what's listed here: kids learn, workers earn, seniors thrive, and communities prosper, because that intersects housing to other important issues like education, healthcare, and community vitality. And so that way, folks who maybe don't know a lot about housing but care a lot about education can learn how homework starts at home, that it's hard for a kid to get homework done without some place to call home. And so we use that a lot because it resonates really well with community members. It's simple, it's not complicated, it doesn't get into all what's bonding, what's this, what's that. It just is a simple message that people can really resonate with. We also create action alerts, like I said, that you guys can take action to, and create the messages so that when you're calling legislators, you feel prepared and informed to make those asks. And this message was really created with support of the Frameworks Institute, which is a national communications consulting group. They came out with a big report on communication strategy around affordable housing, and this was recommended. We also do a lot within the earned media space, and so I listed out some of the goals of our activity with earned media there, to educate and raise awareness. When we have, op-ed or a letter to the editor in media, it puts pressure on decision makers that the community is talking about it, that leaders are talking about it, and so they're more inclined to take action. It also helps create an engaging buzz. That's a lot online too, so that if we have an op-ed or an article on the front page of the paper, that folks online are sharing that and having conversations and why it matters to them. And then it also mobilizes advocates to take action. And so seeing something in the paper or on TV will encourage advocates to take action. And so I included a couple of photos there of op-eds that we helped draft last year, last session, that encouraged legislators to take action on housing.
So another area that the communications team focuses on is advocacy around social and digital media. So our goal of social media is always to connect inside the Capitol, outside the Capitol, and in the media. And we do that with our handle, which is at Homes for All MN, and you can see that there's both a Facebook and a Twitter that's connected there. We use hashtags, the hashtag Homes4 with the number all MN and hashtag MNLeg. And we use Twitter storms and tweet chats, which we can get into in a future webinar because they are kind of complicated. But they're really cool to raise awareness around different issues or different hearings and different events that we're having. And it's just a way for us all to feel connected. And then digital media, we create content like memes and graphics, infographics, one-pagers that can be utilized both on and offline. And then we also maintain our website, which you can click eventually here and see the different areas of the website, along with our blogs that are also another way for us to connect, sharing blogs from different endorsing organizations or blogs about hearings that are happening, action alerts that are happening, things like that. It's just an easy way for people to see and connect with us throughout the state. We focus on our materials and our brand consistency. So we've talked a little bit about the materials that we create, but we utilize it for our legislative agenda. We have an endorsing organizations map that highlights the continuum of housing and all of the endorsing organizations across the state. That's a really great one for lawmakers to see how big we are and what we're doing with Homes for All. We create the action alerts that go out in email blasts and online and in blogs. We have one-pagers for different specific agenda items. So the policy team talked about the different areas of the legislative agenda, and we have specific one-pagers for the different areas of the legislative agenda. We help with creating talking points for testimonies. So the policy team will take the lead on that and let us know what the hearings are and when they are. Community engagement team will let us know who's the right person for the message, and then we'll craft those talking points based on what that looks like. And we utilize data to convey urgency and impact and appeal across the political spectrum and housing continuum. Stories are super powerful, and they can be used for lawmakers and community advocates to make an impact. We include them on our one-pagers and in social media or online, but we also love to create a space for individuals to share their stories at events. So at our end of session rally or at our kickoff events, we'll often have stories that are shared as well, and lawmakers can hear it and community members can hear it, and it is a nice way to connect to the message of Homes for All. We also have an improved and updated online forum for you to share your story, either anonymously or in print if you're not comfortable sharing it in person. And again, those are very powerful tools to be shared with lawmakers and communities. We take the lead on events in these different areas. So we have kickoff events and spring recess events, and then again, the end of session rally. And we create the materials for those. So that's all the materials leading up, the flyers and the Facebook events and things like that. And then for the materials that are at the event themselves. We create the program logistics. So if we're going to have food at the events and things like that, we'll figure out the best place to order those. And the run of show is also part of the logistics of that. So we'll have kind of a here's where you need to be all day for the different events. We'll also create the talking points for the different speakers of the program as well. So the communications team meets on the first and third Wednesdays of every month from 9 o'clock to 10:30. We always have a phone option, and that's always our call-in number, so that's on the website that you can see. And we also meet in person, and that rotates. So if you're connected to us, we can let you know where we're at if you want to meet in person. We'll throw up our emails again here, so you can send us an email if you have any questions or ideas for us, and we're always looking for new members, especially across the state.
We will then transition to our community engagement co-chairs.
Good morning. This is Ron Olehazer. I serve as the executive director at Grace House, which is a homeless shelter located in Grand Rapids, and I'm as a co-chair on the community engagement team. Thank you for joining us. As you see on the screen, the purpose is to create space and opportunities for advocates and those with personal experience of housing insecurity to engage public support for affordable housing issues.
And my name is Matt Trainer. I'm the Director of Organizing at the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless and also a co-chair of the engagement team. Our vision for the engagement team is to use our skills, connections, and talents to connect regionally with those experiencing housing insecurity, to engage advocates, and teach community members how to be advocates for affordable housing. So who is the community engagement team? We are statewide, so we want to make sure we try to do that within team members as well. And anyone that wants to join can really be on the engagement team, but some examples, a lot of nonprofits, individual community members, members with people that have lived experience of what housing insecurity is, neighborhood groups, housing developers, emergency shelters, and et cetera. We also have leadership within the engagement team. We have two co-chairs, which, as we've been saying, would be me and Ron. We have communications and policy liaisons, where we want to make sure there's consistent communication between all of our teams. And then we also have regional leads in, I won't read all of them, but we have regional leads in each section of Greater Minnesota, the metro areas. We also have a lead with the Minnesota Tribal Collaborative to prevent and end homelessness. And if you want to see the names of those regional leads, you can see on the slide there, you just go onto the website and then click on leadership.
And Matt mentioned the regional lead program, and in an effort to make sure our organizations are represented across the state, we put this in place so that we'd have people in each area to talk with others in that same area and bring the information out to them. So we have local experts that lead the community engagement team. We want to make sure Homes for All is a genuine statewide coalition, and having this expertise will make it possible. The main goal, connecting with others in the region, we want to ensure Homes for All is reaching communities across the state. The role will be sharing Homes for All information and actions within your community. Each region will have the ability to create their own plans for their communities.
So what do we do? What do we do as a team? I think first and foremost, it's really important to realize engagement team probably has the most flexibility out of all the teams. We take the lead from policy team, and we use the materials that communications creates. But we want to make sure we're a team that really supports one another, and that can be by sharing information, helping each other out with events, sharing resources with one another. Really, each team member can adapt what they feel they have the capacity to do with Homes for All, and then the team is a source of support. But some examples that we do as a team together, legislative kickoff events, we help out with that. We focus on Greater Minnesota. We want to make sure every year that we have at least a couple Greater Minnesota kickoff events. So we help plan those, we help get turnout, but really a lot of that work falls on the people from those communities. We also do the same for spring recess events. We want to make sure we're still engaging people throughout session, not just at the Capitol, but in their neighborhoods. We also recruit testifiers for Homes for All agenda items. The typical way of doing that is in person, connecting them to the policy team or comms team or however that looks, and then connecting them to a legislator. But we've also started to do that through video. So we know sometimes it's a long drive, or just the weather, or just inability to get to the Capitol. So we've been doing video, and video is always an option as well. We also work with communications and policy to really execute some of these things that we decide to do as a coalition. So if there's earned media, such as letter to the editors, we try to make sure we have each part of the state covered, doing some of that work. Action alerts, regional leads coming big there, making sure that throughout the state, people are calling legislators, calling the governor. We put on the Homes for All rally at the Capitol. We just help out with that as much as possible with turnout. And then also targeted outreach, really making sure we're connecting constituents that are in key legislative districts that the policy team has identified with Homes for All.
So we'd like to mention about why we would like you to join the community engagement team. We think it's important to have representatives from across the state, and you would have influence over what Homes for All does and be in touch with our team and talking with the other teams as well. Join a team of people who have a passion for sharing housing issues in your community. We try to make it accessible through multiple ways. Join our email list, attending meetings, show up at events and bring others with you, host Homes for All events in your community, and occasional in-person meetings, and we'll talk about the remote joining options as all of the committees have. So.
And then also how to join, when and how the engagement team meets. We meet the first and third Wednesdays, 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. And right now we just do that. It's all remote joining. We do not meet in person. That may change at some point, but because we're statewide and so many people are from Greater Minnesota, video and phone conferencing is the ideal way to do it. We use Zoom, so if you're not familiar with Zoom, it'd be great if you can get familiar. We love it when people can join through video and do some of the screen sharing. And if you need a reminder of the link and the call-in option, you can go on the website under coalition meetings. It's also listed there.
And on the screen now, you'll see our contact information if you're interested in finding out about the community engagement team. As I said before, we're always encouraging other people from around the state to join us and be a part of our team and be involved in the work that we all do as Homes for All Coalition. And with that, I think I'll pass it back to Allison for questions.
And as a reminder for folks, you can submit questions through the chat feature or the question and answer feature. We're not seeing any questions through the question and answer feature.
That's another question.
No.
Looks like somebody raised their hand, so give us a second while we while we figure out how to look at that.
Oh, yeah. There's a question.
Oh, we have a question.
Katie, we're reading your question, and Haley will come over.
Yeah, so the question was specifically around housing support, formerly GRH. So when we set our agenda last year for the 2-year agenda, we did do a $100 increase to the room and board rate. We are also taking a look at Beacon Interfaith Housing is coming this next year with a family rate. That was a part of the Metro demonstration, if you're familiar with that. And the coalition has had ample conversations about, you know, some of the great ways that housing support is working, but also ways that it could be better, particularly for populations that may also be on Social Security income. So we will be looking at those items kind of on an ongoing basis, but we do have a particular item on our agenda for this next year.
There's a question.
So we do have another question. Are you partnering with any disability organizations?
Yeah, so this is Haley again, policy co-chair for the DHS side of things. So we do have folks around the policy table who are part of the human services world, the ARC Minnesota, NAMI Minnesota, Brain Injury Alliance. And as we know, you know, working in human services, for all of these issues, you can't really address, you know, living with a disability if you don't have a place to live. And so actively engaging and working with our partners in the disability community.
But I just want to say also, if you know of organizations that are not yet participating, but you think that they would add to the conversations that we're having here at Homes for All, please extend the invite to them. We always welcome new endorsing members and new conversations with other stakeholders.
So we do have a new question. I know that there are some significant changes that are happening regarding housing access coordination becoming an MA service versus a waivered service. Is this something that Homes for All is involved with?
So great question. This is Haley again. Apparently it's my show today. Great question. So the housing benefit coming online, because it is kind of an implementation phasing, it's not something that the coalition is specifically looking on. I will say from the Catholic Charities perspective, which I represent, we are in conversations with the Department of Human Services and other folks who receive housing support, and particularly the supplemental rate, to talk through implementation of that, coordinating efforts, because there is some conflict of interest policies. So there are community conversations going on about the implementation of that, including with DHS at the table. So if that's something you're interested in, I think my information is somewhere, but you can email me and I can connect you with those conversations.
And earlier, just somebody did ask if this webinar, if this information was going to be available later, and just to let folks know that we do plan on putting this webinar online.
Yeah. If you do have questions, I encourage you to use the chat feature. We're having some issues with the question and answer feature, I think. So use the chat feature, please.
And if you're calling in on the phone, we apologize. That may be a more difficult way to answer questions, but we certainly welcome you to reach out to us and we can answer them offline.
I mean, I suppose we could take everybody off mute. Yeah. So we're not seeing any more questions coming in right now. We just want to thank everybody again for joining us today. We will get this webinar online so folks are able to view it. And it does have all of the contact information, but as well, if you go to our website, homesforallmn.org, you can find all of our contact information on our website as well. Thanks again for joining, and we hope everybody has a good Friday and a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.